Much of the reporting on the Russia-Ukraine war focuses exclusively on the front lines. There are regular stories about one side or the other gaining ground or capturing a contested settlement, with analysts poring over statistics concerning each side's territorial gains and losses. But this war is not just being fought at the front. There is in fact a second war, taking place many miles back, deep in the occupied territories of Ukraine like Kherson and Crimea. It's a war that arguably matters much more than the fight for frontline control, because it has a much greater influence over each side's long-term prospects of victory. It's a war that Russia is losing, and the evidence is clear to see. Once safe roads are now turning into highways from hell, long-standing supply lines are being severed, connections are being cut, convoys are being burned, and movements are being stifled by drones and missiles, and surprise strikes that nobody could have predicted or prepared for. Bit by bit, Russia's ability to feed the front lines, to fuel its massive military machine, and to wage this war are being eradicated by Ukraine. This is the war behind the war. And to understand why it matters so much, we have to first understand a golden rule about modern conflicts. They're not necessarily won by the side that has more tanks, soldiers, or other assets, but by the side that masters the art of moving those assets around efficiently. As the legendary US General Omar Bradley once allegedly said, "Amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics." Especially in a conflict that has lasted as long as this one, logistics matter just as much as overall firepower. If Russia wants to keep up the pressure on Ukraine along the hundreds of miles of frontline territories, it needs to be able to safely move troops to those territories. But that's not all. It also needs means of transporting other important supplies such as weapons and ammunition. Repair teams need to be able to get to places where tanks and armored vehicles have been damaged. Medical teams need to be able to move into dangerous areas to evacuate wounded soldiers. Fuel has to continuously flow to the front, so Russia's assault squads are actually able to keep their vehicles running and execute their attack plans. Behind every frontline force, there has to be a vast and complex network of logistics and supply chains to feed and maintain it. And if that network collapses or is even disrupted, everything else falls down around it. Without those supply lines to feed it, any army becomes dramatically weaker, opening up opportunities for its opponent to strike back. This is why, even though the frontline firefights matter and territorial control statistics matter too, this war isn't just about which side controls which patches of land. Not anymore. Now, into its 5th year, it's becoming more and more about which side can actually sustain its operations and outlast the other. It has become a conflict of endurance, and Ukraine understands that. It realizes that it doesn't necessarily need to destroy every Russian tank if it can instead ensure that those tanks don't have the fuel they need to move. It doesn't need to kill every Russian soldier if it can sever the lines that keep them fed. And so it's shifted away from targeting individual battlefield units towards attacking the overall system that powers and connects them. It's a shift that could prove decisive, because we've seen how logistics can make or break even the strongest militaries before. Many times, in fact, all throughout history. The famous French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, for example, learned how crucial logistics could be the hard way when he marched his great army into Russia, anticipating a swift victory. After all, he had assembled one of the most powerful fighting forces that Europe, if not the world, had ever seen. But the deeper his army got into Russia, the more strain was placed on its supply lines. Eventually, those lines were simply stretched too far and inevitably snapped. Food supplies began to dwindle. The flow of ammunition to the front wasn't fast enough. Horses died, and the harsh winter conditions made everything more difficult. The Germans endured a similar nightmare during the Second World War. Again, this occurred in Russia, where the Nazi forces rushed into Soviet territory, hoping that their blitzkrieg tactics, which were so reliant on speed and momentum, would prove too much for the enemy to cope with. But the further they went, the harder it became to maintain those all-important supply lines. And all of a sudden, even the most fearsome military force in the world was forced to wave the white flag in Stalingrad. In modern settings too, logistics remain the bedrock of every successful military. The United States' success during Operation Desert Storm, for instance, wasn't just down to the fact that it had better trained troops and superior equipment. It was also because the US forces found the most effective and intelligent ways to move vast quantities of fuel, ammo, and other supplies, even in difficult desert conditions. Modern conflicts like that, and like the war in Ukraine, consume resources at a remarkable rate, making logistics and supply chains more important than ever. to not only exert pressure along the front but also maintain control in the territories that it's captured. Russia has been forced to build and rely on an intricate web of rail hubs, depots, convoys, command posts, and transport corridors. And those are the very targets that Ukraine is committed to destroying. Recent weeks and months have seen numerous successful strikes across the occupied territories and even beyond, targeting the logistical nodes Russia needs the most. Ammo depots have been set ablaze, rail hubs have been obliterated, road networks have fallen under siege by Ukrainian drones hovering overhead, scanning the ground, just waiting for the first sign of a Russian convoy to come into view before raining fire down upon it. But Ukraine isn't stopping there. It's ready to ramp up the pressure, with the country's own defense minister Mikhailo Fedorov announcing a so-called logistics lockdown campaign on May 27th. In a detailed Telegram post on his official account, Fedorov revealed that this will be a two-stage program, designed to scale up middle strike and systematically destroy Russian capabilities at operational depth. Our task is to further increase pressure on the Russians in the rear and deprive them of the ability to conduct active assault operations. The first phase of the logistics lockdown is all about funding. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense is injecting a whopping 5 billion Ukrainian hryvnias, which will be used to purchase more impactful middle strike weapons for targeting Russian logistical nodes many miles behind the front lines. These weapons include the likes of FP2, Hornet, and Bulava drones, which are capable of traveling longer distances and remaining in the air longer than other models. Some boast operational ranges of up to 200 kilometers or 125 miles. They're also often able to operate autonomously once they enter enemy territory, using their own AI brains to scour the terrain and identify targets, rather than having to rely on human pilots to guide them. More of Ukraine's units will soon receive these weapons, but not all of them. Fedorov revealed that the ministry is operating on a reward-based system, where only the very best brigades get to use the latest and greatest weapons. The funds will be received by the most effective brigades and units according to the E-point system, teams that specialize in destroying the enemy at operational depth and demonstrate the best results in this specific area. The first units have already received funds, and direct procurement has begun. It's a logical decision. Middle strike weapons cost more to make than cheaper FPV drones, and Ukraine doesn't have an infinite supply of funds to work with. It's always operated in a resourceful way, using the assets at its disposal with care and consideration to ensure that nothing goes to waste. There wouldn't be much sense, therefore, in handing out these weapons to units that can't necessarily make the most of them. However, by handing them to the best performing brigades, Ukraine is increasing its chances of launching more successful strikes against Russia, thereby making its logistics lockdown even more effective. Fedorov also explained the second phase of the program. We are centrally launching tenders for the purchase of a large batch of middle strike weapons. Open tenders are not only about speed and scaling up production, they're also about competition between manufacturers, minimizing corruption risks, transparency, and efficient use of public funds. In other words, the first phase is about the here and now. It's about getting weapons out to the brigades that need them to keep up the pressure on the enemy. The second phase, meanwhile, is more long-term. It's about scaling the system on a national scale to rapidly increase the production of middle strike drones, create more competition among drone manufacturers, and standardize procurement at scale, so that many more of these weapons can be rolled out in the months and years to come. Before we look at why this matters and the impact it's already having on the ground, you are watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Fedorov expects that it won't take long for Ukraine to begin seeing the benefits of this program, noting, as early as this summer, the results of the centralized procurement of the medium-range strike capabilities will be felt on the front line. The enemy will no longer feel safe, even at a great distance from the line of combat. And there's plenty of compelling evidence to suggest that Russia is already suffering from the devastating effects of Kyiv's middle strike campaign. Indeed, as Fedorov himself notes, the price of advancement for the Russians is constantly growing. He goes on to explain that as recently as October 2025, Russia was losing around 67 soldiers on average for every 1 square kilometer of territory gained. By April of this year, that number has almost tripled to 179 losses per square kilometer. The minister continues, Russia is suffering record losses, over 35,000 soldiers killed or seriously wounded every month, and we continue to pick up the pace. He notes that Ukraine has quadrupled the destruction of enemy logistics, warehouses, equipment, command posts, and supply routes at operational depth over the course of recent months, and the effects are clear to see. The more Russian logistics are destroyed, the fewer assaults take place at the LBZ, line of battle zone. Fedorov cites 2 key reasons for this. First is the fact that Ukraine has adjusted its strategy to focus more heavily on targets that are further back from the front. Second is the fact that Russia no longer has access to the Starlink satellite service that helped its troops pilot their drones, communicate with one another, and manage their battlefield movements. Deprived of this technology, Russia's forces are running blind through frontline kill zones, and behind them, all hell is breaking loose. This can be best seen in the occupied southern regions of Ukraine, particularly the southern sections of Donetsk, as well as Zaporizhia and Kherson. There, Russia has for years relied on a relatively small selection of supply lines, turning what were once Ukrainian highways into military convoy routes. And for years it got away with it. The routes were too far back for Ukraine to realistically and consistently target. Even if it could carry out the odd strike now and then, it simply didn't have the technology to do so with any regularity. But that's all changed. Now Ukraine has the technology. It has the weapons to strike these locations and is using them to incredible effect. In Donetsk, for example, Ukraine's Azov Brigade of the 1st National Guard Corps recently revealed that its long-range drones are actively bringing Russia's supply routes under fire control. More specifically, they're targeting 2 major roads leading into the Ukrainian city of Mariupol. One of those roads runs to the Russian port city of Taganrog to the east, while the other stretches further north into the Donetsk region to Volnovakha. These routes form part of the larger land corridor linking mainland Russia to occupied Crimea and passing through several occupied regions in the process. It's a vital passageway for the Kremlin to transport food, ammo, and other supplies to the Crimean Peninsula, especially now when all other routes have been either destroyed or deemed too dangerous to use. The Azov Brigade released footage on May 25th showing their drones actually scanning traffic flows along the highways, picking out Russian military vehicles and striking their targets with ease. In the accompanying caption, Azov wrote, "Azov patrols the border area around Mariupol. Ukrainian territory must be free of Russian troops. The most reliable way to achieve this is to move the sanitary zone for enemy logistics closer to Russia itself and the occupied Crimea." The unit concluded, "There will no longer be a safe Azov Sea region for the occupiers." And if this evidence is anything to go by, they're absolutely right. With increasing numbers of Ukrainian drones patrolling these highways, it may soon become too risky for Russia to use them. That will leave the Kremlin with no viable options to move supplies into Crimea, which is also under heavy siege at the moment as Ukraine's drones and missiles damage and destroy the region's remaining air defenses and military installations. This isn't just happening in Donetsk, but elsewhere across the occupied territories too. Around the same time, Azov was sharing its control over the highways into Mariupol. Another Ukrainian brigade, the 412th or Nemesis Brigade to be exact, also revealed that Russian officials had actually decided to close down one of their main logistics routes running across the south of Ukraine. Highway R280, which the Kremlin called the Novorossiya route, extends through the occupied cities of Mariupol to Melitopol in Zaporizhia and Simferopol in Crimea. It's the final stretch of the Crimean land corridor and arguably the most important piece of the Kremlin's logistical puzzle, because there really are no alternative roads available in this area for Russia to move its supplies from point A to point B. The Kremlin's forces have grown to rely on it to move various pieces of military equipment and other supplies westward. That was until the Nemesis Brigade came along and unleashed what it's calling a secret new attack drone that hasn't been publicly seen before, and is reportedly proven highly effective behind enemy lines, taking out dozens of Russian trucks and fuel tankers. On Telegram, Nemesis wrote, "The scale of the losses forced the Russian command and the occupation authorities to restrict the movement of heavy equipment along the so-called Novorossiya highway. The enemy's attempts to use field and dirt roads for detours are also proving futile. Ukrainian drones successfully detect and eliminate targets on any terrain." This ties in with images and footage that have also spread across social media recently, showing major roads out of Mariupol lined with the burned-out remains of military vehicles and smouldering tank chassis, proving beyond any shadow of doubt that these routes are no longer safe places for the Russians. As the Nemesis post notes, even though Russia has tried to use alternative dirt tracks and off-road routes to keep supplies moving, Ukraine's drones have no trouble at all seeking and destroying them wherever they go. Logically, Russia should be able to do something about all of this. It claims to be the second best military in the world. It boasts about its state-of-the-art air defenses. It pours billions of dollars into its armed forces every year. Yet the very supply lines it claims to control are rapidly turning into vehicle graveyards. Even as hardline Russian nationalists and Z bloggers call for the Kremlin to take action and install nets or other anti-drone measures along these roads, they remain under siege from the skies. This is likely due to the fact that Ukraine hasn't just focused on targeting the routes themselves, but the various defenses surrounding them. Kyle Glenn, investigator at the Center for Information Resilience, recently revealed that there had been a 300% increase in Ukrainian strikes on Russian air defenses and electronic warfare assets in March and April of this year, with around 80 systems targeted in total. Many are expensive and hard to replace, and every time Russia loses a defensive system, it becomes even easier for Ukraine to hit it again, even harder than before, as Glenn notes. The danger for Russia is these collective losses of air defense systems effectively leading to a cascading failure, as each individual loss makes further Ukrainian drone raids more effective. And it's not going to stop. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed as much on May 5th, writing on X. The number of mid-range strikes has also increased significantly. There are now twice as many strikes at distances of 20+ kilometers compared with March, and 4 times as many compared with February. And there will be even more. This is a priority area. As a direct consequence, Russian units are already feeling the heat, just like Napoleon's forces and the Nazis before them so many decades ago. They're beginning to move their most important assets, like ammo depots and command posts, further back from the front lines. This is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it may help to keep these locations a little safer. On the other hand, it complicates logistics even further because supplies have to travel longer distances. And as Ukraine's drones get even better at traversing these longer distances, it may not matter how far back Russia repositions its command posts and supply nodes. They'll all soon be found and destroyed by Kyiv's fast-evolving UAV army. Even Russian journalists are starting to see the coming crisis, with war correspondent Dmitry Steshin warning that unless urgent action is taken, in the coming months logistics will collapse. That's exactly what Ukraine is banking on. In the meantime, Kyiv's forces are recapturing land en masse, which you can learn about more in this video. Or check out this one to see how Ukraine managed to find a way to bring down Russia's multi-million-dollar missiles without even having to fire a shot. And make sure to subscribe to the channel for more military news and insights, and thank you as always for watching.